All right, well, the rest of the demo, we're going to cover spring cleaning and just some basic troubleshooting things that we do when we first build computers. It's kind of an odd thing because we would initially start out with Mike asking, well, what do you guys do when you build computers to make sure that they're functional and they work and they don't cause you problems? And some of that got turned into spring cleaning, so we'll do a little bit of both. Steve, you want to go first or do you want me to go?
You go ahead. I'm just going to kind of talk from back here because I don't want to be on the soul-sucking camera.
Well, that's the non-soul-sucking camera I bought. That's the extra feature.
Yeah, that's what she said last time.
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's all you need.
All right. One of the things that I've learned the hard way on computers is that they don't have very reliable memory, the RAM in them, right? And bad RAM will never show up as bad RAM. It's one of the most annoying things to troubleshoot. You'll get things like blue screens, if you're lucky. And one of the things that you'll actually get that you won't even notice sometimes when you have bad RAM is you'll get cache corruption, which means when you copy a file to your computer, it doesn't wind up the same as what you sent it. And when you pull it back, it doesn't wind up the same way as what's on the computer. You get little bit errors in those things. And I had that going on a computer and didn't know it. I was occasionally getting blue screens like once every 3-4 months, kind of, all right, it's Windows. And then I was trying to do, I'd taken some MacRame images, which is our compressed backup images. We're going to cover in our backup demo, and we keep talking about MacRame, so we're going to demo it again. But it's a compressed image of a computer. I had a bunch of laptops. I'd set one up. They're all identical. Loaded Windows on it. Then got it all the updates, all crap going, which takes like 3 hours, right? So rather than do that individually times 16 more laptops, I took a MacRame backup, stored the MacRame backup on my server, and then booted with the MacRame recovery disk and said restore the image to this machine, and then gave that new install the new key that was on the bottom of the laptop, times 16, right? Problem was, about every other time I was doing this, MacRame come back and say that the image is no good. Right? Now, the first time it said the image is no good, I'm like, well, that's kind of odd. All right. Try it again on another machine, the image is good. Try it again, the image is bad. Real random like this. I'm like, wait a second, it can't both be good and bad. What the hell's going on here, right? So when I ran it on the machine, tested it on the machine where the file was, it was good. Pulled it across the network, about 1 out of 5 times it was bad. Well, that's kind of freaky. What the hell's going on here? And then I remembered I had a machine several years ago that I had some troubles copying files onto where they get corrupted. It turned out to be bad RAM. So I went and ran this program I'm going to show you and discovered I had a bad RAM chip in that computer. Didn't know it. That's what the cause of my random blue screens were about every 5 or 6 months. And it corrupted probably 2 or 3 years of the files on me. So I went on the hard way. Whenever you build a new computer, the first thing you do before you install your operating system and go through all that grief is check your RAM, right? If you add a new RAM stick to a computer, check your RAM. If the computer's acting a little flaky, check your RAM. And a lot of times you'll find I had somebody bring them that it was a bad power supply. It was bad RAM. So I always start by checking the RAM typically, assuming it boots. If it doesn't boot at all, look for the power supplies and stuff like that. So you go, well, how do you check your RAM? I'm glad you asked.
And while he's just starting us up here, another sign that you're having RAM issues is I speak English, is if your computer goes from running, pretty fast to about half its normal speed, especially when you're running like multiple programs. That's kind of a good sign that something might be amiss. A lot of times it's software, but if you got a bad stick of RAM, it'll be like almost instantaneous. You'll start losing about half your power.
All right, I'm using this. Just added my woes that I dropped this computer on my foot on the way here.
Is the computer all right?
I don't know. I'm kind of curious here.
What about his foot?
You didn't care about that.
Well, he's not limping, so.
Well, it's valuable to the computer.
The bad part is, of course, it landed right on the corner, right on my toe, where my sandal strap is, so that's fun.
You didn't get your baby done.
Yeah, let's just break a toe out. There we go. This is memtest 86.
I can't run off past 86.
Memtest memtest 86, yeah. Let me show it on the screen
Is it free?
here. Yep.
I think then,
It's good to show up on the external monitor. Memtest, MEMTEST, and the number 86. It's been around for years, okay? And you'll download an ISO from their website, it's free, and you burn the ISO to a disk and you boot with the disk, okay? And I missed it on the startup here, but there's a couple buttons you can push to tell what mode you want to run in, multi-threaded, multi-core, how much you want to do the memory, so on and so forth. If you don't touch it in a few minutes, it runs it for you anyway, which the defaults are usually the best. And all it's going to do is it just sits there and runs test after test, reading and writing random numbers to your RAM, okay? Every single address. And it's got this whole little pattern it goes through, like it'll turn everything on to ones, all the way through the memory. Then come back and read that, make sure it's all ones. It makes everything zeros, comes back and reads it, make sure it's all zeros. Then it does like a 0, 1, 0, 1 alternating pattern, goes back and reads that to make sure it matches. It just keeps doing that over and over and over again. A lot of times if you have bad RAM, you'll have like one cell that'll be bad, but it's only bad if the cell next to it's written too, right? So that's when you get these kind of really random errors that rarely pop up. Windows is only going to blue screen if that flipped bit winds up in a Windows driver someplace. So you have to kind of let this thing run for a while. Typically I let it run for 8 to 12 hours. Let it run overnight. Usually it pops up with an error within the first hour or so, but just let it run, put it away, forget about it. You know, go to bed, get up the next morning, go to work, come back, check out at night kind of thing.
And the more RAM you have, and that's both in capacity and in the number of sticks that are installed, the longer it's going to take.
Yep. Yeah, they'll tell you which pass it's on. Right now it's on, let's see, it's 17% of the first pass, and it's of this test, it's clicking up at 20% through, so it's going to keep going on and on and on. You at least want to get through a full set of one full pass, but ideally the more passes you do, the more likely your RAM is good. So if you did one pass and said it's good, I'm going to go, well, it's probably all right. If you do 20 passes, I'm going to say, yeah, it's right, it's good. Right? The other thing too is RAM tends to fail the hotter it gets. So when you very first start this thing, if the machine's cold, the first pass or two, the RAM's not really good and hot. So you want to run a couple passes to get this thing good and soaked and hot, so you stand a better chance of it failing.
Good question.
Yeah.
So if you do have multiple RAMs and all that, undoubtedly, does that tell you which one it is? Or do you have to play?
Usually you have to play the game. Sometimes it'll tell you down here, but I've had it scroll off the error so fast I can't find it sometimes. So typically you got to play the game. And the bad thing you can have too is you can have 2 perfectly good sticks or 4 perfectly good sticks, right? Just that one of them doesn't like the others, right? And it'll be just fine if you start shotgunning the parts, but when you put them all together, they don't work. The one's not right.
And that is why, if you're buying RAM, it's always best to buy how much you're going to get of the same type and the same speed.
Yeah, one of the BIOS is, there's different RAM timings and different voltages for all the chips. And the BIOS actually asks the RAM chip, what can you do when you turn it on? And the chip and the BIOS communicate, and the BIOS then says, okay, you need these parameters, these timings and stuff, I'll set myself this way. Well, the problem if you have 2 chips, which set of timing, which set of voltage does it use? Right? If they're different. What's that?
Slowest one.
What if there's different voltages too? Right? You can't use the highest voltage because you cook the lower voltage one, right? You can't use the lower voltage one because you make the upper one not be able to read and write reliably. So you got to watch when you mix and match chips like that. And some chips are okay because you'll get the one that says, well, all right, you're going to be lower voltage, I'll kind of be okay. You'll get the other one that says, I don't care about having a higher voltage. I got some space and some airflow. I'm okay running a little hotter. Ideally, what you're going to have happen is your chipset should go, I'll run this stick like this and this stick like that. And better chipsets will do that. They'll individually bank the address and time the memory banks. But you're talking typically server machines that are running error-correcting memory into it, not some Dell or Gateway machine you bought off of Amazon for $100.
And he's talking a lot about the different temperatures and the voltages. This is a bigger problem with laptops than it is with desktops, because obviously laptops have a lot less airflow. And as they start to heat up, yeah, you can definitely, I've burned sticks of RAM, like literally set them on fire from some laptops because I didn't have proper airflow.
So the first thing I do whenever I build a computer, whether it's from old parts, new parts, or whatever, I get it working, right? It boots up, woohoo! I don't even bother to install the operating system. I go straight from memtest, let it cook, right? And make sure the memory works. If you've got a bad power supply, this will usually kind of burn around on you too, so it's kind of good, it's a good low-level burn-in. But the key thing is to catch that memory. Before you load your operating system, all your stuff on there, and transfer all your precious files over and discover 5 years later, oh, this one's all screwed up, because you had a bad stick of RAM. All right, you got this is the key. Memtest has been around forever. You'll find that online. It's Memtest 86. It's free.
On Facebook already.
Where are you putting this on Facebook? I didn't see it on the Gateway Computer Club. You sure you got the right Gateway Computer Club? I saw a picture of, what's the name?
Not there. Not all of them are going. The admin may need to okay them before they hit the actual
Yeah,
page.
I didn't see any alerts on, well, I'm doing it through my phone, so it might be different.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's one thing to do. The other tool, I use a lot when I work on machines, is Gparted. I haven't run Gparted on this laptop before, but Gparted does it. It's a Linux Live CD. So it's a Linux utility, and it lets you modify the partitions on your hard drive. So if you want to create a new partition, you can use Gparted. A lot of times this comes into play. You got a laptop, and your Windows installation gets completely crapped out on it, right? And it's got a recovery partition, but you no longer have the little disk that came with the machine that lets you get to the recovery partition. So a trick you can play is you boot into Gparted, and in Gparted you can set the recovery partition to active, so it boots off the recovery partition instead of your dead Windows install. And presto, it's just like you put in the recovery disk. I was doing the Donna Fairmont City Library for 4 or 5 laptops at least.
Yeah.
So Gparted is a pretty good utility for messing with hard drives. You can also use it to copy from one drive to another drive. So if you're going to clone your hard drive, if you're going to clone your hard drive, if you got a new machine or a bigger hard drive, Gparted will let you copy from one drive to another drive.
It's also useful if you're having trouble getting to files. There's some recovery options in there for you.
Check my Facebook activity log, and all 3 of them are on. They're not showing up.
We have to pay extra for that feature. Okay, this is Gparted. What's showing you is the part that this is the one hard drive I have in the machine. If I have multiple hard drives, they'd be on drop downs over here. There's only the one. And these are the partitions I have. There's actually 2 partitions and some empty space in this drive. I don't have another drive to show you this, but if I wanted to, I could just come up here, click on this, select copy, then select the other hard drive from the drop down and do paste, and then click apply. It'll copy one drive onto the other drive.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah. Oh, you're on the right? I've already booted, so I probably won't see it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, actually. I didn't know this. Will it pick up USB drives?
I don't know. You can plug it in and try it. The Linux operating system on it will have some of Gparted will do it on a refresh.
Am I on the camera?
Evil things.
Terrible, awful things.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Wunderbar.
Yep. So what I could do, this is my first drive, STA. And I could select this, and I could say copy. And then go to SDB, and I can say paste, and then it would actually copy, then it would apply, and then it'll copy the first drive into the second drive for me. You can also wire in here, like he's got something wrong with this drive, see the little exclamation mark next to that? Okay, so the operating system on, he had this drive running under before, flagged this partition as having a problem, and you can actually run a check disk on this. Check right here. And I click apply at this point, then would actually start to check that disk for me. It's kind of like running check disk. But the good part is when you're running check disk, you're doing it through Windows, which is probably running on the drive you're trying to check, which is kind of pain in the butt. Out here, you're outside of Windows, so you stand a chance of actually the thing to clean up.
When you copy and paste that to the new hard drive, you could take the old hard drive out and put the new hard drive in, and it would just boot up like it would normally.
That's correct. Yep.
Partition, it copies everything, boot records and everything.
Yep.
Yeah, and usually if you do that, you want to try and get like all of the partitions on there just so that it doesn't mess with the boot sectors.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that it would be a full copy, so like you got a family hard drive, you just want to update the hard drive, you just put a new hard drive in, you just do this.
You could do this.
And it would recognize all your information, so it wouldn't have to relicense it.
Nope.
Good.
This is a little bit nuts and bolts. You know, the other utilities kind of do that a little cleaner for you, but the cool thing of this is you can check partitions. It works with Linux partitions. It works with Windows, 95 up to Windows 7. It doesn't.
Now this is a
really care.
Linux-based operating system.
Yes, it is. This is Linux Live. Normally, Gparted is inside of Linux when you install Linux operating system. They've actually put it onto a live CD for you, so you can boot from a CD and run Gparted anytime you want.
And then the most common fixable quote-unquote error that your hard drives are going to have is actually what this one has a problem with. They're called bad sectors, and that doesn't mean necessarily that the disk is dead. It just means that there's some errors on the disk's table that it's having problems reading, and usually the check disk is what repairs that.
Okay. All right, so let's say you got another scenario here where someone has given you a computer and there's files on it, but it won't, they can't get the operating system to start. So it boots, but you get like a blue screen as soon as it boots. Or Windows comes up and says, I don't know who you are, you can't log in. Or Windows just sits there and spins at you forever. And you want to get the data off the hard drive, right? They don't really care about anything else, they want the data to start with. One of the easiest ones to do is hire and boot CD. It's free. And it's got a bunch of utilities. In fact, if you notice, it's got Untitled 86 on it for you. So it's got stuff like that on there. It's also got the Seagate Disk Wizard and some other tools you can do, essentially what Gparted will let you do as well on there. And as well as Boot and Nuke. Boot and Nuke lets you erase hard drives. So if you're going to give a computer to somebody else and want to wipe it, you can Boot and Nuke it. Be careful. There's no coming back from Boot and Nuke. It's gone forever.
Boot and Nuke is exactly what it sounds like. It is a nuclear bomb for your hard drive.
There's part of the magic, which is sort of like Gparted, same idea. We're going to go to the Mini Windows XP thing here. The cool thing about Mini Windows XP is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a miniature version of Windows XP. It's got all the things you're used to in Windows XP in it. So you can plug a thumb drive in here and copy the files from the hard drive onto the thumb drive. Okay? And then give them back to the machine and go, here's your pictures. The rest of it you got to figure out how to fix. There's also the NT offline password reset on this disk too, which we've talked about before. But if somebody has a Windows password, they don't remember what it is, you can run through that. I'm not going to run through it because I don't want to reset my passwords, but you can run through that and reset a Windows password. Yeah.
How long has it been since they've updated this version from 15 to?
I couldn't tell you. They're a little behind on updates,
Yeah,
but
because I was thinking I had that same disk and I thought it was 15 something. I was wondering.
Yeah, 15.2 is, I believe, I think it's either 15.2 or 15.4 is the latest. I know they are working on some other stuff, but they don't really have.
Because I've used this about 3 times to cover passwords.
Yeah.
you can do the same trick with like a Linux Live CD, like the Mint Live CD. You can do it with the Ubuntu Live CD. But the cool thing with, that means you have to kind of know a little bit about how to use Linux to navigate the file managers and things. Whereas this, pretty much everyone's familiar with XP at some point in their life, right?
It's basically a platform so you can navigate your computer with that.
Yep. So if I come in here and do like Windows Explorer, okay, this right here, this drive D, is actually the hard drive in this laptop. And there's documents and stuff from this laptop. Okay. And these are my documents. My desktop. Here's the desktop that was on this machine. I have a lot of stuff on here. So I could plug a thumb drive in, another drive level will show up, and I can just drag the files over there, just like you do with XP or Windows 7 or whatever you're using today. It's the interface you know and you love and you probably hate. You can also run check disk from here, and again, since you didn't boot it off the hard drive, you stand a better chance of getting to actually clean out than if you do normal. You can run the registry edit to go there and change things in the registry and all kinds of stuff like that to fix things.
There's also some programs in miniXP that only run from Hiram's boot disk in miniXP. There's some things like there's a couple of virus scanners. There's a couple of, just bits and pieces for whatever you may need, and it's all in that icon that says HBCD menu.
Right.
Yeah, turn the keyboard to Arabic.
Yeah.
That's fine, as long as you can read Arabic.
No, it'll just type in Arabic.
There you go. So it's got a virus on here and some others. So if you got a bad virus in the computer, trying to get a virus off a computer that you're running on is pretty hard, but doing it outside the machine like this is pretty easy.
This is very good for those hard to reach viruses that either replicate themselves constantly or log you out and tell you that the government done stole your computer.
Yeah. We've seen those before.
Yeah. Okay, now this, I'm going to show you here. On the Hiram's disk there are some hard drive diagnostic utilities that let you read the smart data on the hard drive. Use this memtest, by the way, on the Hiram's disk. There are some hard drive utilities on the Hiram's disk that let you read the smart data off a drive. So if you're not sure if a drive is good, you can read the smart data and the drive will tell you, I think I'm going to fail, or I've got this thing that's way out of spec. You can also do a little bit of work on the drives, like going and reading lower level sectors and things like that. But if you want to actually get if you actually have a bad hard drive and you want to stand a chance of maybe getting it to work again, I'm going to show you the granddaddy of all tools for that. It's been around for decades, literally. Spinrite.
What's it called?
Spinrite.
Right, Steve,
Steve Gibson.
yeah.
I don't know if,
You have never read the story about how he tracked down some hackers using, was it ICQ or IRQ? Man,
yeah. Steve Gibson he's kind of like one of the old time, computer guru wizard kind of guys.
What's his last name?
Gibson, Steve Gibson. He has a website, grc.com, gibsonresearchcenter.com. He is kind of the guy.
read the whole story on the denial of service story where he went after hackers because nobody else would go after him.
He's been doing hard drive work since like the 80s. With this utility spinrite, which doesn't want to pop up.
Well, let me ask you this, with these new SSD drives that they're coming out with, how does these programs work with those?
I wouldn't use these on an SSD drive. This won't do. There's not much you can do for an SSD drive.
Because I was watching something online about that, it was about an hour long, guy from the government talking about how people are using these SSD drives because they're harder to crack, to get into, to find information the way, because it stores it as electrical impulses instead of magnetic waves.
That part, but just in terms of trying to get the drive to work again from a repair standpoint, SSD drives are pretty well, they're about as usable as a flash drive.
On that same note, you don't ever want to try and defragment a solid state drive.
No, you'll burn it in a heartbeat.
All right, this is spinrite. It's a commercial program, but luckily Miss Madalena here let me borrow it. Like I said, this thing's been around for forever. I used to mess with spinrite in the late 80s. It let you do things like set the interleave on the drive. It used to be you had to skip sectors. The drive wasn't fast enough to get back to reading the next sector, and then interleave was really how fast the drive was, and by default it wasn't set right for most drives. You could change the interleave with spinrite. It took it about 2 days, but your drive became 300% or 400% faster just by running it. But it will also let you repair stuff. It's got a couple modes, 2 for recovery, 4 for maintenance. it gets deeper and deeper. You can kind of spend your life going through this thing. But we're going through here, let's say, okay, select 5, 0. And what it's doing right now, this is a graphical display of all the sectors on the drive, okay? And what spinrite does is it goes out there and reads and writes every single sector, right? So it reads the data off the sector, then it tries to write it back to it, then reads it back again to make sure it's good. It'll even go so nuts as to, if you want at the higher levels of operation, it'll read the data off the sector, write a whole different series of patterns, reading and writing the different pattern each time, and rereading it again, to make sure that the sector always keeps the correct data. It doesn't have a stuck bit like the RAM we talked about earlier. Same kind of concept. So it can sit there and read and write the same sector of the drive 8 or 9 times, 100 times sometimes, depending on how deep you set this thing. If it finds a bad spot it can't read, it'll read it, try to get some data off it. Then it'll go move the head over here, bring the head back, try to read it again, because sometimes moving the head lets that sector settle back and work and read it. It'll move it back this way, read it again, move back this way, read it again, move back further, move it back in. It keeps doing this over and over and over again until it tries to get as much data off that sector as it can. A lot of times it can completely read all the data off that sector. It may take it 800, 900 times, but it'll eventually get all the data off that sector. Then it takes the data, writes it to a new sector, marks that sector bad, and tells the track map on the drive, use this sector for that sector instead. So you essentially can get the bad data off your drive. If you can't get the bad data off your drive, at the very least it marks that sector as bad, so that when you reinstall your operating system, it doesn't use that sector again. Right? So if you can't get your drive working again, your data back off it, you can at least put the drive back in service because it's got that bad spot marked as bad. Now, my general feeling on this is that if a drive with one bad spot is going to the trash can, right, okay? But I have had people like, hey, your drive's bad, it's in a laptop, oh yeah, I dropped it down the steps, Well, I got your data back with spinrite, but I really wouldn't trust it because it's got 15 bad sectors on it, one big chunk on there.
Yeah, all in a row.
All in a row. It's a time bomb, but oh, that's okay, I'll just use it. And of course, 6 months later, oh, my drive's crashed, because they never replaced the thing, right? So you can do it. Hard drives are pretty cheap anymore, so I don't know if I would trust one that had bad spots. But for finding bad spots, for validating the drive can have the crap beat out of it and still function, and for restoring your data at least long enough to get a copy back off, spinrite's the granddaddy program. So after memtest, if I put a new hard drive on a computer, it's spinrite overnight, right? And this can take sometimes, depending on what level you set it to, this thing can take 30, 40, 50 hours to run on a whole drive sometimes. So I think my record's about 4 days on this thing.
Depending on the size of your hard drive.
Depending on the size of the hard drive and what level you set it to. Remember I picked that 2 through 4 earlier? The deeper you go.
How many errors are on the drive?
Yeah, when it gets errors, it just really, and you'll hear it sometimes, and it hits a bad spot, you hear the driver clunk, whee, as the drive's spinning back and moving the head back and forth. Sometimes it sounds like a little machine gun in your room, you're like, all right, that one's toast, and you just, in the trash can it goes.
And it is worth mentioning the spinrite does try to repair the bad sectors if they're repairable. But if they're not,
waste of time.
yeah, if not, it's going to skip over them and mark them.
Yep. It just may take it an hour or two to decide that sector is not worth to give up in the sector.
What about one of the IBM CF drives, the little bitty micro drives?
Those little micro drives are genetic, so you can do something like spinrite on them.
Because I got one from a Sony camera and I can't access it by the camera anymore, so I don't know if it's dead or what.
You might be all right with it. The other thing you can do with spinrite, you can look at the smart data. So one of the things I'll do here, read the smart data, and I'll look at the smart data after the drive's been beat up for a little while to make sure there aren't like any horrific things in here. Like the big thing to worry about is the reallocation events and uncorrectable write errors and a little bit above that, the reallocation events. Reallocation events, drives are built from the factory, like your 40 gig drive from the factory actually has 50 gig of space on it. Okay? It takes 10 gig of that and set it aside and tell the drive, don't show this to the operating system. This is a little hidden area over here. You can never see it. No matter what you do, you won't see the extra 10 gig. But if the drive has a bad spot or a spot that's starting to go bad, it'll remap the sector out here to one of the spare sectors in that little 10 gig area set aside like that. And you won't even know it, other than your drive might shudder a little bit, and it'll eventually move it over. So the cool thing is, you know, these drives, the sector's gotten so small, the manufacturing defects are hard to keep out. They've done this reallocation thing. And generally 1 or 2 reallocated sectors you don't worry about, but you start seeing 20, 30, 40, 50 and it's climbing, you've got a bad spot on your drive. Eventually you're gonna run out of those spare sectors and then at that point you're toast. So, yes.
Is there any size limitations to this?
I've never found one. I've never run this on anything bigger than I think a 500 gig drive is the max.
I ran it on it too, and it ran okay. It took bloody forever.
Yeah.
Like, that one literally took me about 7 days to run the full thing.
Yeah.
It got the data back, but once I got the data off, the drive was toast.
Anyway, alright, so again, spinrite, these are just things to validate, and I know it's kind of a pain in the butt to spend, you know, a day testing your RAM, and a day testing your hard drive, and you just bought this new computer, you spent $400 on parts, and you got it working after 5 hours of cussing at it. You really want to put your operating system on there and get that bad boy going, but if you test your RAM and test your hard drive, you're going to save yourself days and months of being pissed off because you lost something valuable on it, or you got some really flaky thing that only seems to happen every now and then going on with it. All right, well that was what I had for validation. You want to do cleanup?
Yeah, we can just run through our heads and speak English again.
You need the machine up?
Yeah, go ahead and boot it into Windows. And by the way, you can download the ISOs like for Hiram Spoot Disk and spinrite. And if you need to burn the ISOs, there's a program called Image Burn on the Disk of the Month. It's a fantastic program for just burning images. It keeps them bootable. It's fast and easy to use. And it talks to you.
Yeah, Image Burn is really good. It's a free program, and really just about anything you want to do with the disk that you used to buy for spend money with Roxy or Nero.
Yeah.
So it would take the ISO and burn it to a disk.
Absolutely. You'll make a disk, make an ISO into a disk. You can fully offer DVDs and stuff with it. You can do
It's called Image
I'm sorry,
Burn.
Image Burn, IMGBURN.
Which one am I transmitting from?
Yeah, I've got that program.